mics should be muted and speakers are on, so that way you can hear the session. If you want to talk about today's session on social media, always feel free to use the hashtag XAPI Cohort and tag the XAPI Gnome. Our presenter today is Aaron Silvers, and feel free to tag him on social media. All of our informations are right in the top right-hand corner. So today is our web session, our fourth web session, and today's session is recorded and will be hosted on YouTube. So that way, if folks are not able to join during the workday, they can always refer back to the presentation and the web session and gain access to the content. That's what's really great about Cohort. It is very flexible for folks who have lives outside of Cohort. So make sure you're sharing those links and telling your friends that you think could benefit from this community, that we have a flexible structure and they can always access the information. Today's agenda, we're going to be talking about XAPI profiles and sending better data using them. Aaron Silvers of MakingBetter will be presenting on that. And then we're going to do our first team check-ins and talk about where your teams should be. And we're celebrating today because we're at 440 people registered for Cohort, which is pretty amazing. As a reminder, it's never too late to sign up for Cohort, so you can always share the link xapicohort.com and folks can always sign up. Behind the mic today is myself, Jessica Jackson. I am the XAPI Cohort host, and then we have a set of producers who help us stay on task and stay on track and run Cohort smoothly. So thank you to our producers behind the scenes, Aaron, Jamie, and Leanne. So what have we been doing in Cohort thus far? We've been talking generally what XAPI is and how you can use it to send data from e-learning tools and things that are not e-learning. Today, we're going to talk about XAPI profiles, and we'll move into understanding the learning ecosystem and understanding the industry. And then we'll wrap up Cohort with some case studies and project team demos. Want to say again, save the date for the XAPI party and download on May 7th and May 8th. Those are really great free experiences to get some hands-on learning around XAPI. Today, we're going to be talking about the XAPI profile or XAPI profiles. So with that, I'm going to hand over the mic to our friend Aaron Silvers of MakingBetter. He's going to talk about sending better data using XAPI profiles. I'm switching the screen to his presentation now. And I'll hand over the mic to you, Aaron.
Thanks a lot. Hi, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are, or if you're just waking up. My name is Aaron Silvers. I wear several hats around the e-learning and learning technology industry. Today, I'm speaking mostly with the hat of my consulting practice, MakingBetter, which I share with Meg and Bo. We do a lot of work with companies and by extension through contracts with sometimes ADL, the group, the initiative out of the U.S. Department of Defense that's responsible for governing XAPI to date and XAPI profiles. And one of the things that we're helping them with right now is a problem that I think will speak to many of the folks who are on this call. I think there's hand raising in this in the app, right? By a show of hands, how many of you have tried to make content work even in a SCORM world, even just uploading content to the LMS? How many of you have tried to make content work without having to correct it, but from Captivate and Articulate and Lectora and other authoring tools, where no matter which authoring tool you published from, it just went into the LMS and it didn't require futzing?
It's looking like 9 folks have raised their hand.
Okay, well, that's actually a lot better than it used to be. um, so, the the thing is like, even with interoperability, just in terms of just getting content to work right in your LMSs, it's taken a lot of work. It's taken a long time in order to make it to the point where you can almost do it turnkey. You know, um, we're now dealing with data and trying to make sense of data, and already we've seen throughout the industry, and the Department of Defense stakeholders have seen this as well, um, that content or data that's being produced from different tools is generating different looking data, which makes it very difficult to actually analyze and use without a lot of massaging. That massaging of data costs a ton of money at the scale of the kind of data that can be produced by a large organization. So it's really important to try to, adhere to the philosophy of garbage in, garbage out, to keep the garbage from ever coming in. And so lots of work has to be done to help make it easy for authoring tools, or easier, I should say, because it's not like the authoring tools haven't been trying to create the same data. Given the instructions that they have available to them at the time that they're able to make their development decisions, in order to make changes, and these are in some cases would be breaking changes to the code that they already produce. Every change makes customers unhappy. So if we're going to do something right, we need to get it right now, so that we ask everybody to make a change that can be controlled out and managed outside of the authoring tool vendors themselves. That way, organizations that are responsible for keeping track of professional competencies and things like that can take control over how that data should be expressed. Okay. So this challenge then is how we end up with an XAPI profile. Okay. Now, a profile, this is the definition of a profile from ADL. I don't need to read it to you. But more importantly is the idea of thinking about this in terms of machine readable versus human readable. Okay. So what exactly would that mean? Credit card's a good analogy. Okay. There's human readable information on the front of a credit card, the number, your name, expiration date, things like that. But embedded in that chip in the magnetic strip is machine readable information. And in a sense, that's kind of what we're talking about in terms of working with profiles. We're working with semantic data that's mostly machine readable to help make sense of what's going on underneath the scenes, with the implementation levels that a designer or a content developer would do. Okay. So if you think about a profile as a blueprint for a successful XAPI implementation, all right, there's a couple reasons why profiles help, right? It allows organizations and stakeholders to produce a common vocabulary and descriptive metadata, all right, so that to help guide tools to instruct you as an instructional designer, per se, what a particular interaction is used for and why you'd want to do it. All right. The metadata is the part that's going to be really helpful to instruct y'all. All right. The machine readable language is what's going to be really helpful to guide content authoring tool vendors and template authors and people who are doing things, who are trying to do more automated tasks with XAPI specifically, will help guide them in ways that are a little bit easier to make use of. Okay. So when we were just developing XAPI projects in the past, we could do what the authoring tool vendors are doing now, which is we could create individual statements here and there. But if we wanted to make any changes, we would have to go make changes at every document level. It's kind of the same way in which we used to deal with styling in our websites until we learned about CSS. Okay. If you think then about like sending better data, right? Profiles enable us to do that in a more standardized and templated approach, right? There's all sorts of different types of interactions and activities and things about the context of what someone's working on or what someone's trying to learn that can be tracked across different devices, tracked across different pieces of content. All right, games, courses, performance support, mobile apps, video, simulations, sensors. All right, profiles can then normalize how that data gets generated from every single source without each of the different people who are making those individual pieces of content understanding exactly what to do up front. It's a set of rules then and instructions that make it a lot easier to do the best practices. So right now the number of profiles is small, and ideally the goal is not to have zillions of profiles. In fact, the opposite. The goal is for us to keep as minimum a number of profiles as possible. If we're going to create new profiles, it should be to express new things or things in new ways that are significantly different than what is already in the library. If we're doing the job right of profiles, we're all using the same profiles. Okay. Our success criteria, then, as you can imagine, is sometimes really hard to describe because if we're right, it's not that people are hardly using it, it's that people are hardly adding to the profiles. So, in that sense, what profiles we have available right now are things that deal with courses and LMSs like SCORM and CMI5. There's a serious games profile. There's a video profile that describes lots of different interactions that you can do with video. There's an ebook profile. There's a PDF annotation profile, so that if you're basically annotating a PDF to work with, you could do that. And there's several other. There's a few other profiles, both available and in the pipeline. Okay. Excuse me. Some of them owned by other organizations like MedBuquitous, all right, with medical education related XAPI profiles. But when we look at an actual profile itself, the language of it looks something similar to XAPI because it's JSON, but really specifically, this is a particular flavor of JSON known as JSONLD, or LD stands for linked data. Okay, and this is where the real muscle of it comes in. So I'm going to get a little bit nerdy here for a second, but if you bear with me, it's mostly so that you can understand kind of here's how deep into how the internet works we have to make sense and bring up to the level of we got to automate this so that people can publish with e-learning the right things, and instructors instructional people who know how to train people and know how to design training for people, but may not necessarily want to know all the syntax that's needed to identify the particular verbs. We want to make it easy so that the people can kind of just organize the information and package it in a way that makes it easy for the implementer to do and do the right things. Okay, so JSON-LD comes from this technology called RDF. RDF is a semantic web standard. It was developed by the W3C, or the World Wide Web Consortium. They are the people who literally, created the web, if you will. But we're not going to talk about RDF today. Again, I'm just kind of trying to give you this background information. Okay. So if you, if the only thing you take away from this is that JSONLD represents the machine readable aspects of profiles, right? That's going to be the part that makes sense as XAPI statements. Okay. Just letting you know how the sausage gets made a bit. But along with this, what people have been doing in practice is developing human readable versions. All right. And there are a few examples of these. CMI5, SCORM, and the video profile especially have pretty robust documentation. Those are the ones that, as we try to start building out tools to make authoring and managing and maintaining profiles uh, like scalable and more widely available and more uniformly done. Um, these are the ones that we've been looking to as exemplars of how to document this stuff well. All right. Um, and there's a few other lessons learned that we're throwing into the works too, which will be worthy of other presentations for in the future. Let's go move on. So let's first talk a little bit about concepts in profiles. So when we're talking about XAPI in concepts, all right, it has a very specific meaning with XAPI profiles. They represent things such as the verbs, the activity types, the extensions, and the attachment types that can be in an XAPI statement that you're accounting for, that you're governing, that you want to apply to this profile. Okay. There are, when you do that, when you create a concept, there are several required and some optional properties that allow you to define some basic information about that concept, so that if that concept was going to be made available to you in an authoring tool environment, let's say, that metadata would have to describe what the thing is that you might want to select and implement. Okay. Now, the required properties are the minimal things required, and then the optional ones are more advanced properties for maybe establishing the relationship between different concepts, the machine readable relationship between different concepts. Okay. When we're talking about extensions, we're literally talking about extending an XAPI, the data that's in XAPI, to do something a little bit more than what XAPI is already structured to do. Okay, so these are another type of concept that can be represented in the profiles. You can govern extensions that are included or available to you when you are doing things with a specific profile. Okay, they're custom properties. All right, it'll extend XAPI beyond the data model. So in the far right column in this slide, all right, you can see all the required properties are the basic things like a label or the title or the name of the concept, and the definition or a description of that concept. And then the optional properties provide more advanced options, like whether a concept has been deprecated, or like something that you authored and then later on you decided, yeah, I don't want to make this available anymore, so we're not going to deal with this anymore, so you deprecate it. Whether there are recommended activity types or recommended verbs, and so that you can suggest things to people if they're trying to make use of this, and JSON schema for constraining the extension to a specific type, so that you can start controlling exactly what that extension might apply to. Now, this seems, I know, way down the rabbit hole for a lot of folks, but I guess what this is hopefully trying to translate to you, and if you can imagine with me, is the power that could be made available to you when you start creating learning experiences for people. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about templates and patterns. All right. So one really cool aspect of the profiles that are templates and patterns. Now, the community gave us a lot of feedback when we were trying to figure out how to even spec out XAPI profiles. And so as we were developing that spec, the community really spoke up. And the idea there was that XAPI, it comes back to like the tin can registry and the recipes, right? So if you've ever heard discussions related to recipes, statement templates are really the more modern version of recipes, all right? But they're based on the XAPI. They're based inside of the XAPI profile spec, so they can be uniform and they can be governed and they can be adapted, right? So like concepts, templates and patterns have several optional properties, but unlike concepts, they only have one required property. All right, so in a nutshell, templates are used to define the structure and the rules of XAPI statements for a specific profile, and the patterns are used to identify a sequence or some kind of pattern or order that one could expect of the statement templates. All right. So that if we're looking to, by timestamp or anything, do some analysis, it starts indexing, looking for specific patterns of specific types of statements that you have already identified, which then will help hopefully speed up interactions that you might want to do with the LRS and reporting. So when you're creating a profile, typically you want to start with use cases and what interactions do you want to track with XAPI? Now, there are use case templates available that can help you think through your use case and eventually arrive to a profile. And there are some links later on in the deck that I'll share, right? But some of the screen captures, some of the video of the resources that Jason Haig was using in working on the video profile are what you see in front of you, right? They also created a reference implementation using a plugin in library. If anyone is interested in looking at an example, the idea there is that if you're going to put together a profile and you want it used, the profile as XAPI defines it in the spec only describes a certain amount of things. We're going to talk about that in a second too, right? So point here is that like anything else that you can accompany as document implementation guidance to provide for how to help people actually use the thing that you're making it's good, and what good is supposed to look like, what success criteria is, right? That's going to be really helpful in making sure that people take the work that you're doing and the intent that you want to do it in and get it out the door. Okay. So, high-level steps in creating a profile, defining your use cases, author and reuse, all right, prototype and refine, publish and share. Okay. That's for creating a profile. Again, the goal is not that we're all creating profiles, but you shouldn't be afraid to do that. All right. The goal is, though, that we're not going to create things that already exist. Want to avoid that. So there are some basic templates and manual processes that are in place to create and publish profiles, and that URL xapi.vocab.pub/resources that has details available to you on how to on these exact steps themselves. Okay. Now, that link, xapi.vocab.pub, is also the site that you want to go to, even if you don't necessarily need to use all of a profile, but you want to use some existing verbs, activity types, or extensions, the concepts. You can reuse the IRIs for any of the existing concepts in your own XAPI implementation, and those will stay consistent. For example, simply browse by all the verbs, and they're going to be listed in alphabetical order. Okay.
Aaron, we got a few questions in the chat.
Okay. Question 1: Is there from Dave Jameau? Hi, Dave. Is there an XAPI profile validator? Not yet, but that is one of the things that we're working on with ADL right now. That's actually that work begins. I think that work begins probably around May. I think per schedule, but is absolutely coming. All right, Brian. Is there any type of profile validator? Okay, good. You all answered the same question. That was the same question, and that's the answer. It is coming. All right, I'm seeing Kristen's question really quick because I just see it at the bottom here. If we're creating a profile that builds off an existing profile but is different enough to warrant a separate profile, how important is it to match the language of the existing profile? I'm going to give you all sorts of implementation guidance further down the chain, and it's not going to be in this presentation because we're just we're right now. My head is focused on making sure the plumbing works. I can't wrap my head yet to you at this very moment around design guidance, but be happy to help out as soon as I can switch my headspace to that. All right. So while the vocab server allows you to browse, sorry. While the vocab server allows you to browse existing concepts, all right, to reuse in your statements, it doesn't allow you to see statement templates or to validate your content against existing statements, which are some of the most important things you can do with a profile. Okay. The vocab server, or the profile server that is being developed, all right, is going to have some of these capabilities, all right. But the vocab server, as it exists right now, that xapi.vocab.pub, all right, it'll allow you for browse, but it won't be able to. You won't be able to see the statement templates themselves. Okay. But the frustration of trying to use xapi.vocab.pub, which is kind of like the best thing around for managing RDF type, solutions in terms of open source solutions that everybody uses. Like that's a solid implementation of what is the best of practice, and it needs to be more straight. XAPI in general and profiles have to all be more straightforward and scalable. It's got to be more approachable. Okay. Right. There are any number of reasons, use cases that we were thinking of when we were thinking about profiles. Okay, and there are, right. If you're designing learning experiences, you want to be able to incorporate best practices into your designs for your learning experiences. You won't have to guess what they are. You shouldn't have to Google 1,000 different websites to figure out what if you're doing, like, let's say, an accessibility profile, if such a thing existed. All right, you don't want to do if you're programming accessibility, all right, and you want to be able to track that stuff with XAPI, you don't want to be guessing what the right statements are. You want the American Disability Association to tell you exactly what vocabulary you should be using, because they should be the ones who govern that information, right? So we want to be able to put the governance of what data, of the data model, or the taxonomy, even, if you will, at the level of persons or organizations who have the ability to govern, such kind of, data, and have membership organizations that follow them, right? Anybody will be able to publish profiles, all right? But how many of them are going to be, widely used and made available is going to be governed by organizations who are basically governing XAPI profile servers, right? All right, I already see tons of questions. All right. Is there guidance on selecting, using, and or if needing creating a profile? I can give you design guidance in another presentation, but I'm really not there right now. This headspace for this audience, and I'm sorry about that. Is there a references section to help new XAPI users to have direction? Yeah, it is on GitHub. um, do purchased LRSs like Watershed build these profiles for you? So here's the thing, okay? There's two levels, two operations that I think you need to think about with profiles. What I'm describing to you is really a technical capability, okay? But that technical capability has to enable use cases that you can design for, that you can architect for, that you can measure for success, right? In my opinion. Now, I can't spec for you how to design these things, but I can try to as these tools and technologies are made available, we're going to try and push out this information through discussion groups, all right? Like much like, in obviously the Torrance cohort, right? Cohorts, right? Want to get this information out to you in terms of what we think the leading best practices are, right? But again, we're introducing profiles. This is a technical capability, so we're like, for an LRS provider to build a profile for you. Technically, some of them may have tools to build a profile, but I'm pretty sure there's two different LRS vendors already that do, maybe three. But designing it, making sure that it's right, and right for you, requires thinking and tooling and information that just, like, we're going to have the infrastructure in for it by October of this year, or at least the start of it. But we're just ramping up. So I know how bad it's needed. Okay. Okay. I hope that addressed that question or appropriately. If not, sorry. To all of these questions and all of your points, and they're not even stupid. They're not stupid questions. They are great questions. These profiles could help with some of this help, right? The profile spec formalizes how to do this stuff, but everything you want that is helpful to you as an implementer is in a spreadsheet or a document, all right? We lack tools that automate some or all of the process to produce the JSONLD document that we would use to help with automating stuff, right? And further, finding those profiles is fragmented. ADL's got a whole repository in GitHub that most people do go to now when they're looking for profiles, right? But you still have to know what you're looking for, and notably where you have to look for these profiles, all right? So we needed to take a little bit of a bigger picture, all right? We got to think holistically about the challenge of governing a dynamic and ever-expanding reference for semantic interoperability. Because think about it. Think about how many ways in which you could, make an XAPI statement unique from each other, and all the different ways and all the different controls that would need to be enabled, so that there's a balance of people being able to have the creativity and the freedom, the flexibility to track whatever they want in whatever way they want, right? And control for the kind of things that they themselves create, right? That innovation at the end node, that end user level, that's the innovation that changes the entire industry, right? We need to make sure that has a path up the chain. But we also need to balance that with organizations want to have controls over the kind of data that they're taking responsibility for. Different organizations want to have some governance over what they call certain things with data that other people reference and use. Right? It's a complex network of relationships, personal people relationships, that need to be mediated through technology in a way that makes sense. All right. So we need to think about those things in the scale of publication and maintenance of these profiles, the curation, how long they're good for, how you find them, and how long and how likely are they to change? How malleable versus how resilient are they? Okay. Um, so we started thinking about. I started thinking about a particular use case because I was an instructional designer and a content developer and a teacher before I was this weird data guy, right? Um, So imagine if you were opening up your authoring tool and you were authored a list of profiles to choose from. All right, maybe it's the specific type of, maybe you're working on accounting training, and so you're pulling up like the CPA library. Okay, and once you select that profile, that library, the appropriate data capture is easily set. It makes it easy to create meaningful, relevant learning experiences, um, making use of interactions and expressions and ways of describing things in the learning environment that you can make use of that are applicable. And with that data then being able to flow into a learning record store, all right, you can then generate an insightful visualization that is guided by instructions in the XAPI profile in terms of like, hey, of all the data that this and things like it have generated, these are the types of patterns of interactions that people typically think are important. Make sure that you make at least some of these available. It's not bad, right? It doesn't exactly suck. As a vision, well, we're working on getting her done. All right. So ADL work started in October of last year. I think at full stead. By October of this year, we're going to wrap up this at least this first engagement. We're writing an XAPI profile server, right? It's going to be a new tool. It's going to dramatically improve the quality of learning analytics using XAPI at scale. That's what we're talking about, right? There's two specific design goals that we had for this. One is to promote consistent creation of, management of, and access to XAPI profiles. The other side of it is we need to strengthen XAPI's capability with regard to its data so that we could relate localized community of practice with global best practices. We need to make sure that whatever it is we're doing, make sure that we're advertising and promoting what the really good, strong best practices are for it. At the same time, making sure that we're going to be able to make visibility available for things that come from out of the blue, that have a following, that have meaning, that have significance to mature and grow and develop into communities that can govern the vocabularies themselves. Okay. Functional applications, right? Well, there's basically three functional applications that are rolling out by October, right? We're going to have a publishing component, all right? It's going to enable you to publish and maintain your XAPI profiles. There's going to be a server to make those profiles and their contents available with appropriate permissions via APIs, right? And then there's going to be a validator to confirm a given XAPI profile conforms to requirements. I want to be very, very specific about that expectation. It's going to validate your profile. It does not validate statements against a profile. That's functionality that may come later should somebody wish to see that happen. All right. But the general timetable of this, and again, by September, October of 2020, we're going to have these things iteratively released. We're going to have we just did a code delivery of the publishing component, but it's not ready to run yet. It needs the serving component for that. We're going to have a serving component that work's already beginning, and then we're going to have a validation component for it. And then we're going to be working on another group that I'll have information about in the next week or two. We're going to have, I think, a monthly, if not bi-monthly, discussion group on profiles and profile-related subjects through the IEEE technical applications group. And We'll be just talking about like basically taking questions and bringing up topics, having some prepared presentations, and then a lot of Q&A. And then anything having to do with profiles is up for discussion, and it'll be fun, nerdy fun. Anyway, there's a number of resources that are available for you. Links. I know that the slides are going to be made available to you, I think, after this presentation. And as a summary, all right, profiles are kind of a blueprint for an XAPI project. It can define domain-specific concepts and then statement templates and providing structure for your analytics. Yeah, I don't know what's going on there, but okay, there you go. That's me. I see some questions. Let me try and answer your questions. You're new to the idea of profiles. Anyone aware of competency assessment profile? There is not a competency assessment profile, but there are folks that are already working on competencies and how they would be expressed in profiles, because that's going to be something that lots of people want to do. That's something that I'm certainly doing with the data that I'm generating for Elsevier. But there is not, as of yet, a competency assessment profile that I'm aware of. Can I describe validating a profile versus validating a statement against a profile? Sure. If you are creating a profile and you want to make sure that the document, the JSONLD document that's going to govern your profile is valid, we're going to have a validator for that. If you have a statement in your LRS and you want to make sure that that statement conforms to a specific profile, right? We're not going to be able to do that yet. Does that answer your question, Brian? All right.
Perfect. Seeing that there's no other questions in the chat, I'm going to transition over. Thank you so much for discussing profiles and answering all those questions, Aaron.
You're very welcome, and I'm really sorry that I can't get into design questions in a half hour, let alone 5 hours. So
it's okay. Contact information is right there.
Yep.
Can continue the conversation offline. So thank you for your time. Thank you for the presentation. We're going to hop right back into some cohort business.
Thank you.
So while the presentation is loading, we're going to talk a little bit about where your team should be now. So we are in the 4th week of cohort, which means we're moving out of that forming, storming, and norming area and into digging into details. So I've seen lots of teams, one, have their GitHubs ready. They've started meeting and talking about different tasks. They've started even trying things, breaking things, and scoping out what they're going to be doing next. This is what we're going to be doing for about the next month. And again, want to reiterate that it's never too late to join cohort. So folks are always welcome to join these teams. That said, today is our first team check-in. So want to talk through this process a little bit. Team check-ins are given using GitHub. If you are not sure how to access GitHub or how to get into GitHub, there is a bot for that within our XAPI Cohort Slack channel. So Matt pinned a post in our main channel, and essentially what you're going to be doing is hovering over a message, any message, and then look for the More Actions menu, and then you click the Join Cohort GitHub. Now, if your team already exists within GitHub, and we'll talk about which teams already currently exist in our Spring 2020 XAPI Cohort parent group, then you can join your team directly using this bot. If your team does not exist and you are going to create your team, you're going to join under the large parent organization of Spring 2020 Cohort. Then when you log into GitHub, you're going to add a team. Once that team is added, then your team members can join using this bot. If you need support on either one of those items, whether you are going to create a team or you're going to just join a team that already exists, feel free to shoot Matt or myself or Alex a message in Slack, and we can help you figure all of that out. That said, I'm going to share my screen now so that we can hop into the GitHub and look at everyone's team update. Right now, we currently have 16 teams. And we're going to walk through every week. We're going to use our team public GitHub page. And this is where your teams should be submitting their updates on Wednesday night. So whether that's Wednesday at midnight, when I come in on Thursday, I go through and review all the updates and make sure things are ready to roll. So Aaron, we're going to have teams give their updates. So if you can give folks mic access when I call their name, that would be really great. Thank you. So our first team that we're going to talk about is early childhood education, who has an update on GitHub. Joanne, are you available to talk about ECE? Seeing that I don't hear from Joanne yet, I'm gonna just read the update for folks. So this week they've gotten their Google Drive set up and they have the link there. They also have a Practice Pebble book posted. Where they're needing support, they're wanting folks to, most of their work will incorporate e-learning realms. They want to consider the positive impact your XAPI talents can have on early childhood education. So though you might be using this in corporate settings, let's think about how this can affect our youth in early childhood education. This really requires out of the LMS data capture. So if you want to support the team, go ahead over and join their team page in Slack. What they're going to be looking for in the next week is creating storyboards of content and objects and update and review statements. Brian, they're calling you out. They might need some support there. The next team that has an update is Team Alexa, and I believe Izzy is on the line to give that update.
Yep, I'm here. Sorry about that. So yes, thank you, Jess. This is Izzy, and our team just met actually yesterday for the second time. And we are kind of, in case you're not familiar, for those not familiar with our project, what we're trying to do is last cohort we created sort of a simulation environment for how we might train like a technical support representative. So the idea is that they would take the call and Alexa acts as sort of a user who's having some technical challenges, and then Alexa provides you with some dialogue and then some different options for how you can respond. You select one of the responses and then it kind of continues on. So we kind of built that last time. During the last cohort, we want to make some updates to it. We discussed some of the enhancements that we're going to work on going forward. Everyone has some assigned tasks to move ahead. Don't really need any help right now just yet. We're still sort of in the exploratory phase for some of these enhancements, but I will definitely let you know if we need any help from the cohort.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Izzy. Team Podcast had their first meeting last Sunday and have refined their scope a bit. They're focusing on the first proof of concept that can detect listener actions in HTML5 in a web player. embedded podcasts instead of a podcast player app or at the hosting level. And they're going to use that to generate XAPI statements. Team Zapier Sheets hasn't been able to get off the ground right now. They're hoping to get back to it in the next week or so. So if you're interested in working with them, they're creating an e-learning experience that can be updated in real time using Google Sheets and using and receiving XAPI statements via Google Sheets. Team SharePoint LMS integration. Is anyone on the line to give that update? Stephanie or anyone? All right. Seeing as there's no one, team audio video. Is anyone on the line? Jeremy, Taylor, or anyone able to give the update? Okay, I'll read some of their accomplishments. They created their Slack, they created their GitHub team, they created a repository, and created a generic Moodle course, and created lots of content to support that. So creating 2 separate LRS, one with Yet Analytics and one with Squirm Cloud. And they created Zappy Apps, installed an app to integrate XAPI with YouTube, and created a pathway on Zappy Apps with the YouTube video. They don't need any support currently, and are still scoping out what is going to happen in the next week. Team Adaptive Learning. Is there anyone on the line to give this update? Brady or anyone? Okay. Their accomplishments for the week: they investigated a few options for organizing and displaying content. They pondered around front-end only approach using something like reveal.js or a CMS approach or something like WordPress. Some things that they might need support with are anyone who with education, theory, or instructional design experience could help them out. So go ahead and join their Slack channel. Anyone who knows machine learning and artificial intelligence could support them, and anyone who could come up with a good topic to create a module. So any IDs that want to support this team, go ahead into their Slack channel and start that conversation. What they want to accomplish in the next week is they want to prototype and decide what statements they'll be sending from their module. Team Pebble, Kristen, are you on the line to give your update? Alrighty, I'm just going to read it for her. They held their first meeting to identify what everyone on the team wanted to work on. They don't need any support as of now, and in the next week, they're going to continue digging into Pebble and CAS with the intention of helping to develop a multimedia upload extension. And Brian, Judy, and Cassandra will work on an XAPI profile. And Kristen set up the GitHub so that we can see their updates. No problem, Kristen. Thank you for submitting your update on GitHub. So we do have a few teams that don't have their GitHub pages yet. So Brian Floyd with Team Captivate JS Library, are you on the line to give your update? I see you're in. Jamie or Aaron, can we give Brian some mic rights? Okay. Team Brian.
Hey, Jess, Brian, you should. Oh. Brian,
Go ahead,
if
Aaron.
you're called in, if you hit the star key twice, it should unmute you.
Can you hear me now?
We can.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, excellent. Thank you for that. Sorry, I didn't realize that I needed to do that. So anyone that's been following the Team Captivate project, something I abruptly changed in my careers just this last week. I didn't really know I was going to do that, so I've lost licensing to Captivate. That doesn't mean I won't still support the project. If anybody is interested in it, I'll still help with any tech stuff that I can and those sorts of things. But in lieu of that, I've got about 6-7 weeks off before I have to do much else, and I really want to immerse myself in XAPI. So any teams that are looking for any help, I mean, I'm no expert, but you know, I can hold my own. So kind of what I've committed to already, but I've got a lot more bandwidth, I believe, is I'm going to help Team Pebble with putting together an XAPI profile. Team Audio Visual, I'm going to help them get their LRS set up and actually do some group admin stuff in the LRS instance that I have, because I lost my LRS admin when I resigned. So I've got to get much more familiar with the LRS than I am. And the other thing is the early education. I know that Joanna had asked me a few times now to help her audit her statements and maybe even help her skill up a little bit with JavaScript in regards to XAPI. So happy to do that. But I've got more bandwidth. So if any of you don't know where to start, you're stuck. Again, I don't know every discipline and all of the different cool projects that everybody's doing. I don't know that I can contribute to all of them, but if it's general XAPI stuff, please reach out to me. Keep me busy for these next 7 weeks. I'm super excited to really be immersed in XAPI, and timing couldn't be better. So I'm happy for the opportunity, and I'm here for you guys, whatever you need. Like someone said before, no stupid questions. Everybody's got to start somewhere. So please reach out to me as needed. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for offering that up, Brian. Make sure y'all are reaching out to him on Slack. He has lots of bandwidth and willing to help. Thank you so much. Team Dragon Stats. Is anyone on the line to give an update around that project? Alrighty. Team Interactive Video. Team Mapping Data for AI. Team Moodle Plugins. And I think that's all for now. So if your team does not have a GitHub and you want support, Team Makey. Brian, I didn't see that in Slack. So if you want to give an update on behalf of Team Makey, go ahead. So Jason from Team Smart Builder to LRS says, we had our first meeting. They have their first meeting tomorrow to refine their brief and focus. It will likely settle on the analytics side, including integration with other systems. Thank you for that, Jason. And David, they're just taking current storyline file and putting it in XAPI code. I believe that is for Dragon Stats. All right, I think that those are all of the team updates for now. If you need support getting your team page in GitHub, please reach out to us in Slack so that we can have all of them uploaded in the next week. So Brian is sharing some updates for Team Makey. They're planning their first group meeting in March. And if you want to join Slack. They're going to be posting a Google Hangout. Unless there are other recommendations, they're working to set up a GitHub and use building a cross-platform app for setup and testing of the Makey. This will also serve as a baseline for building an XAPI interface for the Makey kit. All right, thank you. We're getting close to the top of the hour, so we're going to go back to wrap up today's session. And we just want to leave you with some good stuff to know. Our weekly meetings are using Adobe Connect. The link is there. Next week, we're going to be talking about receiving data, the new learning ecosystem with Chris Tompkins of Rust2C Software. And our XAPI party is in Michigan and online on May 7th. You can sign up there. If you have any questions, comments, or concern, I'm always here in Slack or on email. My email address is there. So get out there and make something. It's now 3 o'clock, the top of the hour. Have a great Thursday, cohort.